3 lives, 3 worlds. Wherever step goes, lotus blooms. Metamorphosis. Lotus Step Chapter 9. Book 1. Xushui Garden was built in the western suburbs of the capital, with 2 gardens and 16 courtyards built against Jingming Mountain. In the east and west gardens, strange stones are built to form a clever mountain, and hundreds of flowers are gathered to form a wonderful garden. The 16 front and rear courtyards have pavilions and pavilions that look like dancing dragons and phoenixes. And there are also secluded rooms and small rooms that give an elegant and upright atmosphere. What is even more magical is the last courtyard, which is connected to the water. There is a huge water reservoir, which connects the mountains and water to irrigate the 16 courtyards, forming a grand scene of dozens of meandering water running through and around the garden, like a dragon walking like a snake, which is very interesting. It is so majestic and exquisite that it cannot even compare with the imperial palace in the capital. At first glance, it is the handiwork of the late emperor. Because he was not an outstanding prodigal like the late emperor, it can be said that it would be difficult to have the courage to build such a palace. After settling down in Xushui Garden, Chengyu stayed with her grandmother, the Empress Dowager, for half a month. The Empress Dowager and the Empress Dowager were old and did not like to move around much or lively, so for 15 days in a row they stayed quietly in Songhayuan, one of the 16 courtyards, reading, copying, and discussing Buddhist scriptures. Jade perfectly missed the emperor's banquet with the ministers, the emperor's tour of the garden with the ministers, and the emperor and the ministers enjoying the theater and sideshows together, a series of entertainment programs that she loved very much. Moreover, the Empress Dowager devoted herself to the Buddha, so there were only vegetarian meals in Songha Courtyard, which also made Chinyu feel depressed. Fortunately, she handed over the handkerchief, and Miss Chi-Inger, the legitimate daughter of General Chengwu Hofu, who came to Xushui Garden with her grandmother, came to rescue her with a chicken leg or duck neck every day. On the 16th day, Chengyu was finally freed from Songhayuan. Because the emperor personally came to Songhayuan to express his feelings to the Empress Dowager, saying that the crown prince of Wunuosa Kingdom came to court with his young brother and envoys, and boasted about the performance of his female envoys during the banquet. He asked him for a kicking match. He was right. A few days later there will be a competition between Dashi and Wunuosu. Although the 4 heroines who will represent Dashi in the competition have been selected by Eunuchshin, if something goes wrong during the game, there will always be a substitute, so I want to lend Princess Hongyu, who is good at kicking the ball, for use. The Queen Mother is right. Chinyu followed the emperor out of Songhayuan, and he was really excited, so he talked a lot. For example, the emperor asked her, in that kickball match with Wunuosu, do you know why I went to the Empress Dowager to find you as a substitute? Normally, she would offer the mantra, my sister is a fool, I am a slave, I don't know, and directly gave up the stage to the emperor. The emperor would do whatever he said, because everyone in the palace was already living in such a miserable state. But today she spoke very enthusiastically. Brother Emperor pities my sister. She beamed. My sister knows that Brother Huang actually doesn't think my sister's kicking skills are outstanding at all, and he doesn't really want to use me as a substitute. Your Majesty, my brother felt that my sister had suffered a lot after reciting the sutra for 15 days at the imperial grandmother's place, so I specially used this reason to save my sister. My sister is really touched. The emperor raised his eyebrows. Then do you know why I made a special trip to rescue you? She smiled with crooked eyes and said from the bottom of her heart, because my sister is well-behaved and sensible. The emperor laughed angrily at her. You are well-behaved and sensible? You are talking nonsense. She admitted her mistake faster than anyone else. Then I know I was wrong. The emperor looked at her and couldn't get angry. He coughed and brought up the business. Since I have rescued you, you should also do me a favor. When you see the general later, don't lose your temper and cause trouble for me. If you do it, you will be really sensible, and I will be happy. Changyu couldn't understand why the emperor suddenly mentioned the general, but seeing that the emperor didn't want her to express any opinions, she obeyed without expressing any opinions and just nodded. Yes, I understand. The emperor sighed. I know that you feel aggrieved, but the general is the pillar of the country. The words that the northern guards are not ashamed of Anjia before they are destroyed are not an oath made specifically to fight against you. This is the great determination of a general. I am often moved by it, and you should respect it. Northern Wei was still ashamed of Anjia. These 8 words sound familiar. Qingyu went through it in her mind suspiciously, and suddenly she had a flash of inspiration and remembered an old incident. When she first returned to Ping'an City, a general broke off her engagement. When Chengyu's mother, Princess Jing'an, passed away, an old Taoist priest who performed rituals for her mother once predicted her destiny, saying that she would suffer 3 disasters in this life: illness, fate, and love. To overcome the calamity of illness, there is the calamity of life, and to overcome the calamity of life, there is also the calamity of love. Each calamity is followed by another calamity. No matter which calamity goes wrong, it will hurt her life. Only by surviving the 3 calamities can she survive. Seek peace and success. Among her various catastrophes, the old Taoist especially mentioned the love catastrophe, saying that this catastrophe corresponded to marriage and marriage in a distant place. Once she married far away, the life of the princess was over. Therefore, Qingyu doesn't care much about marriage. As far as she is concerned, as long as it is not a marriage, it is a good marriage. Therefore, when she first heard that the Queen Mother had granted her a marriage, she felt for a moment that fate had finally opened her eyes to her. Later, when she heard that the general refused to marry, Li Xiang was extremely angry, but she had no opinion. She only felt that God's will was like a knife. The destiny is still the destiny after all. At that time, she didn't realize that this matter was a big deal to her, so she didn't take it to heart. Within 2 months, I had completely forgotten about it. At this time, the emperor mentioned it, and she remembered that, in fact, this should be considered a big event. Then, she intelligently sensed that in the emperor's mind, she should be a resentful girl who held a grudge because the general broke off the engagement. It was obvious that the general would also accompany her to Chu Shuiyuan this time. The emperor was afraid that something would happen to her that would disgrace the royal family and bring shame on him, so he came to warn her in advance. But the emperor still felt ashamed of her after all, so he warned her so seriously. This is great. She immediately fell into the drama and said to the emperor sadly, wiping her tears, "Then, a princess whose engagement has been broken off is really very bitter, and it is difficult to be a human being." But the emperor asked his sister to live in peace. She choked, "Then I don't have anything else to think about." She choked and twitched. I heard someone said that when the emperor's brother entertained the ministers a few days ago, the opera troupe he invited to sing was the singing is very good. Watching it can relieve your worries and boredom. Maybe watching the show can alleviate my sister's suffering. The emperor was an emperor who was always afraid of girls. He was most afraid of girls wiping their tears in front of him. Hearing Qingyu choke, his eyelids immediately jumped and he raised his feet to leave. He said quickly, "In this case, let them do it again. You just have a few games." Qingyu wiped the corners of his eyes, but stepped in front of the emperor, blocking him from choking. My sister hasn't finished speaking yet. She choked and twitched again. My sister was thinking. This is the right time to eat the kind of melons that are offered as tributes in the South when watching a show. They have thin skin, thick flesh, and sweet and juicy texture. I wonder if they will offer them as tribute this year. The emperor's scalp was numb when he was stopped by Su, and he continued to say quickly, "I just came up this morning. I will get you 2 later." Chang Yu also wiped the corners of his eyes and pointed out 5 fingers with his free hand. 5. The emperor didn't want to stay any longer. Then 5. Qin Yu was released from the Songha courtyard, ate the melons given to her by the emperor, and listened to the operas sung specifically for her 3 times a day by the emperor, and lived a very happy life. When she got tired of listening to the drama, she remembered that she was a substitute and still needed to show up in the kickball team that would play on behalf of Dashi against Wu Nuosu. Juju is a game of polo. Qingyu has played Kuju and shot jutsu since she was a child. There is a kickjuice court created for her by Zhu Hibiscus in the back garden of Shawalu. She often rides a horse on it and gallops on it. At the age of 14, she can already ride on a galloping horse. They play many tricks on horseback to hit the wooden ball into the goal. The level of shooting among women is considered to be very high. But because she had never played polo in the palace, the emperor did not know her ability. Eunuch Shin spent a lot of effort to select a team of 6 people in total. In addition to Cheng Yu and Miss Qi, there was another noble lady and 3 palace ladies. Since the big game is coming soon, I have been practicing very intensively these days. Chen Yu is only a nominal player, so he has no chance to practice. She herself felt that it would be just fine for her to watch from the sidelines. This is what she thought about. Based on the standards of the players on the field, if she were to play rashly, except for Miss Qi who could handle it, it would be difficult for her not to lose the confidence of the other 4 players. This would be detrimental to the entire team. Maybe it's not a good thing. Miss Qi's level is also much higher than the other 4. Out of the same sense of responsibility, she rarely goes to the field to practice. She is either late or leaves early. She doesn't practice well. Most of the time, she spends most of her time beside Cheng Yu with a broken book on her face. Take a good nap. Cheng Yu doesn't care, and Eunuch Shin is not easy to control either. Eunuch Shin felt that it was too difficult for him. After practicing like this for a few days, the next day was the competition. At the end of the day, the emperor led hundreds of officials to the bowing court in front of the Mingwei Palace, which only opened when competitions were held. The viewing platform was packed with people. His Highness the Third Prince sat beside the Imperial Master today. The Third Highness was ordered by the Emperor to train troops in the camp on the outskirts of Beijing a few days ago, and only entered Sushui Garden the night before. Therefore, most of the envoys from Wunuosu and Dashi who were here to spend the summer mostly didn't recognize him. But such a handsome young man, so handsome and extraordinary, and sitting in the honorable position to the right of the Imperial Master, it can be seen that his position is also very high, which naturally arouses envy and curiosity. Yanlong looked at Lian Song from a distance, but saw that Lian Song did not raise his eyes to look at the court. The Imperial Master was talking to him, but he tilted his head to listen and did not answer. The folding fan in his hand was touching the armrests of the chair. Yanlong's heart moved. In her vague dreams about the 9 heavens, she could sometimes see Lian Song like this. There are always various banquets in the 9 heavens. His Highness does not put on airs. He always appears at important public banquets, but it is always like this. He does not pay much attention to the banquets and looks careless most of the time. No matter when or where, the Third Highness is always the Third Highness. She felt that it was hard to see through His Highness, but also hard to extricate herself. Someone touched her arm. Yanlong turned her head and saw Princess 17 sitting next to her. The 17th princess covered her mouth with a silk handkerchief and came over to talk to her. I haven't seen the general in a while, but he is still as handsome as ever. Before she could answer, she said mysteriously, just now I was chatting with the 18th sister. Come on, I remember that the general is your cousin, Sister Yanlong. Then sister, you must know that the imperial grandmother had intended to grant a marriage to that girl Hong Yu and the general, right? Yanlong said nothing. The 18th princess tugged on the 17th princess's sleeve, but the 17th princess didn't care. We are all sisters, what's not to ask? Xiang Yanlong asked, has my sister ever heard the general mention this? Yanlong was quiet for a while. Sister is well informed, but I haven't heard my cousin mention this matter. The 17th princess didn't believe it and looked at Yanlong with raised eyebrows, but seeing that Yanlong remained silent, she couldn't press the question any further, so she found a step for herself and said, then the general is protecting Hong Yu's reputation, right? The general is a righteous man, but the emperor's grandmother also prefers Hong Yu too much, which makes the matter so embarrassing. It is a big matter of marriage. Naturally, the general cannot accept a little kid who only knows how to play around all day long. The girl is a wife, so... She covered her mouth and laughed. The 18th princess, who had a timid look, looked at Yanlong and then at the 17th princess, and her lips turned white to dissuade the 17th princess. Sister 17, don't talk nonsense. The imperial grandmother granted you a marriage to the general. Under the princess. It's because the princess has the most honorable status. Since the general is an important minister and cannot be treated as a princess, he should naturally be given the title of Hongyu. However, this is not a matter of whether the imperial grandmother favors anyone. Yanlan didn't pay attention to what the 17th princess said again. She turned her gaze to the court. Although her face was calm, her heart felt heavy. She had indeed heard about the marriage granted by the Empress Dowager to the Third Highness and Hongyu, and the fact that the Third Highness resisted the decree and refused to marry. Yanlan knew that Princess Hongyu was the orphan of Prince Jing'an. Because of the Queen Mother's love for Prince Jing'an, Hongyu was somewhat favored by the Queen Mother. Hongyu was still young, no more than 16 years old, but she had a very beautiful appearance, a charming appearance, and a lively temperament, so the emperor also liked her very much. But she and Hongyu had not spoken much. When she first heard that the Empress Dowager had offered her marriage, she was indeed a little surprised, but she also expected that His Highness would refuse. The fairies in the 9 heavens are all extremely lustful, and none of them are as beautiful as the Third Highness, let alone a red jade. But the Queen Mother's marriage grant made her start to seriously consider the marriage that the Third Highness might have. She thought about it many times, but every time she thought about it, her heart sank. Just as the 17th princess said, according to court regulations, a prince-in-law could not serve as an important minister, so the Empress Dowager granted a marriage to Lian Song, and it was absolutely impossible to give the princess a daughter-in-law. There is no chance that she will have any chance with His Highness. If there is any good thing for her in this life, the only thing she can be thankful for is that it is impossible for anyone in this world to be like His Highness. Because this is the mortal world, everything they see is mortal. It is impossible for a mortal in this world to impress His Highness the Third Highness like that, so that the Third Highness would rather bear the serious crime of violating the prohibition of the Heavenly Palace to marry her. She had recalled a lot of past events recently, and the more she recalled, the clearer she became that the Third Highness, who seemed romantic, was actually the most ruthless. But he is ruthless at best. After all, before his ruthlessness, having Chang'e in this world is special to him. And Chang'e can be regarded as her previous life. Yanlan couldn't help but cast her eyes diagonally across again, landing on Lian San. She saw many people's eyes on him, but he didn't focus on anyone. This is enough. Lian San is not here to watch the shooting match today, but to do business. For him these days, there is only one thing that can be regarded as serious business, and that is searching for Zhu Ti. An important bright line about Zhu Ti is the red lotus seeds mentioned in the history book of Nanran Kingdom. Princess Hongyu may know the whereabouts of this red lotus seed. It was originally the responsibility of the imperial master to talk to Princess Hongyu about this matter, but the princess was imprisoned in Songhe Courtyard since entering Tsushui Garden. Songheyuan is the territory of the Empress Dowager. It should be noted that the Empress Dowager believes in Buddhism, but the imperial preceptor is a Taoist priest. Buddhism and Taoism are different. The Empress Dowager and the imperial preceptor have deep grudges. The imperial preceptor cannot even get close to the gate of Songheyuan. Don't talk about seeing the jade. Seeing that it was really difficult for the imperial preceptor's office to advance, His Highness the Third Prince, who was free, took up the matter and gave the imperial preceptor a way out. And because it was rumored that Princess Hongyu would fight on behalf of Dashi today, His Highness the Third Prince came here to wait for her. However, when the golden gong sounded to officially kick off the game, Hongyu did not appear on the field. The spy went away for a while, then came back and whispered into the ear of the imperial master for a while. The imperial preceptor relayed the news from the spies to His Highness the Third Highness. Your Highness, and I came here today in vain. The imperial preceptor frowned. It was said that the little princess got into trouble and was locked up in the emperor's study and made to kneel down, with 4 eunuchs. Look, the emperor ordered her to kneel for 3 hours before letting her out, so she won't be able to catch up with the competition anyway. His Highness the Third Highness stared at the competition field without looking back. What trouble did she get into? And the emperor didn't even let her out of the competition. The imperial master was silent for a long time. It was said that she was roasting birds in the yard yesterday afternoon and was caught by the emperor. What roasted bird? His Highness finally turned around. It's literally roasting a bird. The imperial master performed a very vivid set of actions. It means lighting a fire, plucking the bird's feathers, brushing it with oil, roasting it, and dipping it in cumin powder, like this roasted bird. The Third Highness was a little confused. For a princess, this is a bit naughty, but it is not causing trouble. Why would the emperor punish her? The imperial master was silent for a long time again and said, maybe it's because the little princess roasted the emperor's pair of lovebirds who always accompany him and are called his concubines by him. His Highness the Third Highness looked back at the arena and, after a while, he said, "Oh." The imperial master said emotionally, "I heard that when the emperor arrived, his pair of concubines were put on wooden sticks and roasted until they were charred and oily. The little princess was happily telling her companions to eat them later. Add spiciness to one dish, but not the spiciness. When adding spiciness, use a mesh to drain it so it can be spread more evenly." His Highness the Third nodded, very particular. The imperial preceptor said, "But this is really too cruel for the emperor. I heard that the emperor was going to be mad, so he pointed at her and said, 'How brave. You personally buried a pair of beloved concubines and then punished the little princess. That's it.'" Asked Lian San, "Since the princess can't come, does your Highness still want to continue watching?" His Highness the Third Prince sat there with his chin propped up. Sit down for a while. Chang Yu was also wronged. She never expected that two birds flew into the yard. She roasted them casually and roasted the emperor's beloved concubines. Fortunately, I have been accustomed to kneeling since I was a child. I knelt for the entire game in the emperor's study room and didn't feel anything bad, except that my knees hurt a little. The game ended when he was released. Chang Yu, who took a shortcut and ran out, saw the emperor and his ministers leaving the viewing platform from a distance. She squatted under a big tree near the horse fence for a while, waiting for the spectators to leave sparsely before climbing over the wall. Entered the venue. A bunch of people from the game just now were still in the field, looking at what they were arguing about. As promised, Miss Chi was waiting for her on the sidelines, a little away from the crowd, with a bay red horse standing beside her. Chang Yu's eyes lit up and he hurried towards Miss Chi. When he was rubbing shoulders with the 7 or 8 golfers who were still noisy, he accidentally heard a few arguments between the two teams of golfers. It was basically Wu Nuosu's dissatisfaction with what happened today. Game. Threatening that if their captain hadn't eaten so bad yesterday that he couldn't get out of bed and didn't play today, Shichao would never have been able to win. Dashi actually won. On the one hand, Qingyu was happy for the emperor, but on the other hand, he felt that this game should not be worth watching. It was at the third quarter of the hour when the sun was setting in the west. There were only 1 or 2 people left on the viewing platform, but there were 2 groups of people on the east and west sides of the court. Wu Nuosu and Dashi's players were in the same wave, and Cheng Yuqi was in the same group. The loyal servant Xiaodao of the eldest lady and Miss Chi is a wave. Dusk is always a quiet time, but it is not quiet on the court. The main reason is that the players of Wu Nuosu and Dashi have been noisy. Chang Yu and Miss Chi were quarreling when they were enjoying the horses side by side. They were arguing when Cheng Yu and Miss Chi got on the horse and ran wildly along half of the arena. Cheng Yu and Miss Chi had finished running and started playing for a quarter of an hour. When they hit all 10 goals into the goal, they were still noisy. When Cheng Yu and Miss Chi both scored 10 goals in a quarter of an hour, their noise finally subsided, and when Cheng Yu started to play flying during the game, copper coins. Xiaodao was surprised to find that the venue was actually quiet, and the noisy crowd all gathered around her, and some even gathered in front of her. Cheng Yu and Miss Chi originally only used half of the court to entertain themselves so that the noisy golfers could have enough space to quarrel seriously. At this time, she saw that the golfers who were originally standing on the east side had gathered together. Although Miss Chi didn't know what they were doing, she still reminded her out of goodwill. Sometimes the copper coins played by the princess will fly around, and the coins will fly around. Stay away, be careful of getting hurt. At this time, Chang Yu did not notice the new movement on the court. She was concentrating on making the horse under her crutch, the stick in her hand, and the 5 copper coins on the ground on the left side of the horse, the same place. The so-called flying copper coins refers to placing copper coins on the court, and then Pegasus goes over to hit the coins with a stick, hitting only 1 coin at a time. Legend has it that there was a genius who hit the bow in some time. More than 10 copper coins were tremblingly piled up on the court. The genius flew away on horseback. Every time he raised his staff, he would hit one, but the remaining coins would not be scattered, and all the coins hit were even. Flying in the same direction, it is still 7 feet away without any gain or loss. Chang Yu has always longed for this genius's magical skills. He has been practicing secretly for many years, but he has never achieved this level of achievement. The last time Chang Yu played this game with Miss Chi was before going to Lichuan. At that time, she could only challenge 5 copper coin pillars. As she said, the coins she hit were flying around, and the distance was uncertain. Today, it was a rare occasion for her to encounter Kaifeng, the luxurious venue in front of the Minghui Palace that the late emperor had spent a lot of money to build. She was determined to challenge the 5 copper coins she successfully hit to fly in the same direction, so she was very focused. Xiao Dao had sharp eyes, and, even after retreating 8 feet away, she still saw Chang Yu's solemn face, so she cautiously took a few steps back and kindly reminded the Wu Nuosa golfers in front, "Our princess, use your strength and hit the ball. It's common for copper coins to fly 7 to 8 feet away." He added with lingering fear, "It really hurts when it hits you. It's better for you to step back." Standing directly in front of Xiao Dao were a forward and a defender from Wu Nuosu. The short guard took 2 steps back and moved next to Xiao Dao. He looked as if he wanted to talk to Xiao Dao, but he had just argued with Dashi. For a long time, I was embarrassed to lower my face to open this mouth, so I looked a little confused. Xiao Dao was still a little distracted and asked, "Do you have a stomachache?" The short guard shook his head like a rattle. No. "Oh!" Xiao Dao nodded. The short guard was sticky for a while and tentatively said to Xiao Dao, "You said this game is called Flying Copper Coins." Flying copper coins means that Pegasus uses the stick to hit the copper coins on the ground, right? Is this to help practice aiming? Xiao Dao has been paying attention to Cheng Yu's expression. Seeing that the princess's expression has become more solemn, the experienced Xiao Dao took 2 steps back. She didn't quite understand what the short guard had just said, and replied vaguely, "Well, you have to aim to be able to hit." Seeing that the knife was quite cooperative, the short guard's confidence greatly increased. "Our captain also practices this often," he said reservedly and complacently, "but this copper coin pillar is still a bit too big. If you, the princess, want to practice aiming, you can use a smaller one. Let's try something to challenge. For example, our captain will practice with a small ball the size of a grape. He will say that our captain has good eyesight and excellent skills. He will ride off on horseback and every stick." Before he finished speaking, the ground suddenly moved under his feet, and the knife pulled the knife. The little guard raised his hand, and when the 2 of them stood still, they saw the girl in white who had been riding the horse towards the dragon gate for a while, turning the horse's head deftly. The little knife visually observed that the turned horse was in a straight line with the 5 copper coins, and then the girl suddenly leaned over and raised her staff to gallop the horse. The horse shot out like an arrow, with the force of breaking the wind, and in an instant, it was close to the coin pillar. In the blink of an eye, the staff fell, and a copper coin flew out, while the galloping horse headed towards the dragon gate without stopping at all, and after another half-circle, it came towards the remaining 4 coins. Just like a speeding meteor passing through the Tianmen 5 times along the same trajectory, 5 copper coins were shot out one after another during these 5 repetitions. Thousands of steps marching through the field, horses treading the dusk. Because Chang Yu never stopped the horse's hooves from the beginning of riding the horse to the end when he knocked out the 5 copper coins, so everyone present could only feel the 5 swings of the stick by the stunning girl on the horse's back. In an instant, In Pufeng's iron hooves, the only things that everyone could clearly see were the 5 swings of the girl in white and the final whereabouts of the beaten copper coins. Taking the copper coin pillar as the starting point, the 5 coins that were struck flew 7 feet away and landed in the due east direction, without increasing or decreasing, forming a 1 shape. The whole place was silent. Chengyu reined in his horse and immediately stood in front of the dragon gate. He looked at the row of copper coins with a character a few feet away. He habitually raised his front to wipe the sweat. When he realized that what he was wearing was not a men's kuju suit, he wiped it with his sleeves. She seemed to be still immersed in the vivid swing just now and did not pay much attention to the sudden silence on the court. After wiping the sweat from her forehead, she held the club in her hand and walked slowly towards the horse astride the horse. Miss Chi walked over. Miss Chi reacted the moment Chengyu walked toward her and clapped, "Beautiful." Dashi's players also reacted, but they were probably restrained, and a little violently. They all stared at Chengyu with breathless concentration. As for Xiao Dao, who had seen Chengyu play this game many times, she always felt that the princess would one day be able to develop the magical skills she has today, so just like her young lady. Xiao Dao was also calm despite being shocked and could continue to play the same game. Wu Nuosu's little guard chatted, "By the way, you seem to be telling me about your captain just now. What happened to your captain?" The little guard's face turned red and white for a while, and he glanced at Xiao Dao silently. The tall forward who happened to be standing in front also had a red face and turned to leave. The little guard sprinted 2 steps to follow his forward. Gone. During Chengjuan's reign, although the imperial master had begun to take care of his old age, he would occasionally be summoned by the emperor to discuss matters. The emperor was in a good mood today and summoned the imperial advisor to discuss matters after the competition. When the imperial master entered the study, he met 2 eunuchs reporting to the emperor the movements of Princess Hongyu, saying that the princess ran away as soon as she had knelt for an hour. They followed her to take a look and found that the princess had gone to the wedding venue. The emperor just nodded, as if he was expecting it, and didn't say anything. Now that he knew the princess's movements, the imperial master thought of blocking her, so after a cup of tea, he looked for an opportunity and hurried back to the viewing platform. It was the end of the hour when red clouds dyed the western sky. While watching the ceremony, the imperial master was surprised to find that His Highness was still sitting in his original position. The venue has not been sealed yet, and there are no competitions. Only a few girls and a few horses occupy the northwest corner, and a few people seem to be talking about something. The imperial preceptor sat down next to His Highness and followed His Highness's gaze. The girl in white riding on a maroon horse fell into the imperial preceptor's eyes. The imperial master was slightly surprised. That was indeed Princess Hongyu. Although he has not seen Princess Hongyu for several years, that face is really unforgettable no matter what. A few years ago, the beauty of that face seemed to be contained in a bud, but now it has begun to bloom, and that reservedness has actually grown into a kind of unwillingness to speak. Princess Hongyu is now an adult girl. The imperial master considered it for a moment. "Has your highness recognized Princess Hongyu?" Although His Highness the Third Highness replied to him, he did not answer the question. "She should wear a red dress," His Highness said. The imperial master suspected that he had not heard clearly and was stunned. "His Highness." The Third Highness did not speak again, but just sat in the chair with his cheeks propped up. His face did not show his attitude towards the court in his eyes, or even towards the ruby princess in his eyes. The imperial master felt that such a Third Highness is elusive, and I don't know what profound things he is thinking about. A white skirt is fine, but she should still wear a completely red shirt and skirt. This is what His Highness is thinking at this time. It can be seen that there is absolutely nothing profound about it. Although he was far away, he could clearly see Qingyu, who was wearing a white dress on the court. The horse beneath her took 2 steps, causing the snow-white gauze at her feet to move with it, creating ripples like snow-white waves on a moonlit night. The waves went up all the way, wrapping around her slender waist, and then up, covering her whole body. The gauze matched her very well, wrapping her like a white camellia in the morning mist. Beautiful, but hazy. It made her look innocent, like a girl who didn't understand the world. White always made her too innocent. His Highness the Third Prince thought about it, so it was true that she needed to be wrapped in bright red. When the bright red color covered her, it would make her more feminine. Thinking of this, His Highness moved his eyes to her face. Under the bloody sun, her cheeks were slightly red, there was a thin layer of sweat on her forehead, and there was a red plum blossom between her eyebrows. It was obvious that she had exquisite makeup this morning. At this time, not much remains, and only the eyebrows can be distinguished as yuanshan dye. That's a bit of a pity. But the thin layer of sweat on her forehead made her skin a little pink, which was even more natural and attractive than a sweep of rouge. Someone beside her was talking to her. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening carefully, and then smiled. When she smiled, her thick eyelashes drooped slightly, then slowly lifted up, like a butterfly relying on the beauty of its wings, seductive. That kind of laugh. The eyes of His Highness the Third Prince suddenly turned dark. She is naturally extremely beautiful, but because she is still young, the world may still think of her as a child. When he saw her for the first time, he thought she was a strangely beautiful child. But I don't know since when he looked at her, he no longer saw a child in his eyes, but a charming woman. To be fair, she doesn't have many charming moments, and when she makes that charming gesture, she often doesn't know it. But this kind of unconscious charm is even more shocking. Seeing that His Highness had been silent for a long time, the Imperial Master really wanted to ask him a few questions about the princess, so he tentatively called him, "Your Highness." His Highness the Third Highness withdrew his gaze, but still seemed a little dazed. After a while, he suddenly smiled, tapped his fan gently on the armrest of the seat, and asked the Imperial Master, "What is the name of the makeup on her face? Do you know?" The Imperial Preceptor was confused. He had a premonition that the Third Highness was going to talk to him about how to extract the whereabouts of the red lotus seeds from Chengyu, but suddenly he felt at a loss when he heard this question that was so far off topic. After a long while, he asked Lian San very uncertainly, "Your Highness, are you talking about Princess Hongyu's makeup?" His Highness the Third Prince read out the name playfully, Hongyu. The Imperial Master looked at the princess from a distance for a long time in confusion, and guessed based on the knowledge gained from serving the late emperor who served 3,000 people in the harem. Luo Meizhuang? Falling plum blossom makeup? The ice silk is the soul of the snow, lightly dyed with the fragrance of heaven, and a little rouge color of falling plum blossoms, making the winter very springy. His Highness the Third Prince smiled. It suits her very well. Although the Imperial Master is a Taoist priest, his literary literacy is still sufficient. He vaguely feels that these lines of plum poems are not like praising plum blossoms, but more like praising people. Looking at the princess on the court again, the Imperial Preceptor's eyelids twitched. Her face was as radiant as snow, with a bright red and falling plum blossoms on her forehead. It was not like that face that was hard to describe and paint like ice and snow. A little more springy? His Highness the Third stood up and seemed to be planning to leave just like that. The Imperial Master's eyelids twitched again, and he couldn't help but step forward and sincerely admonished, "Your Highness, your original intention of staying here is not to praise the princess's beauty, right? You have not stayed here for so long to block her." His Highness the Third Highness did not look back. Let's wait another day. Dusk had fallen, and the Imperial Master stood alone in the dusk. He felt trapped. End of Lotus Step Chapter 9, Book 1. By Tangqi English translated using Google.